CSLDallas. I'm Dr. Petra Wildis, and we are still in this chapter. I don't know how long we've been in this chapter, but it's been a very long time. It's a kind of a recap of how do we understand the nature of reality as it appears in the human experience, the human condition, the human reality, and the nature of creation. So now we are going to get to the next really juicy conversation. Here we go. This is the third full paragraph on page 123. How are we going to resolve suffering and lack with the goodness of God? Ooh, man, let's go right at it. The problem of evil, the problem of suffering, the problem of all of this stuff that is not going well. The difficulty. So here's the. This is one of the age-old questions. If everything is one and it's all God, right? Science of mind and New Thought is a radical monism. There's not a God out there and us here. We're not trying to bridge the gap. What we're trying to understand is the ultimate nature of reality, the underlying expression of that infinite divine impulse of love and life as it is expressing through creation, the manifest body of God. These are the clothes that the Spirit wears, just as this is the vessel or the vehicle that we use as we are embodied or ensouled here on this space-time plane. And so, if it's all one, if there's an ultimate unity, which we get from Hinduism, Taoism, from the Jewish tradition, from the Christian tradition in its mystical form, from the Islamic tradition in its mystical form, if it's all one, why do bad things happen? Why is there suffering? Right? Why do those things that we call evil, what is that all about? And of course, if it's a radical monism, that means there's only one thing happening, which is this infinite nature expressing itself. There aren't two opposing forces. So we can't say the devil made me do it. We can't say that there's a force for evil contending. We don't even say light and dark are battling, as is so prevalent in the hero's journey, in a lot of the indigenous cultures, that light and dark are constantly contending for supremacy, which we see in so many of the fabulous movies that I most particularly love. all the ones that recreate that hero's journey, like Star Wars and the Marvel comics, and anytime you have a good guy and a bad guy, or a good woman and a bad woman and contending, or good forces, good and evil contending, right? This is an outpicturing of duality, of the idea that there are opposing forces. But if it's all one, there can't be a force for evil. So where does suffering come from? Why do bad things happen? Why do people do horrendous and horrific and awful things that we would call, I have no trouble calling them evil? And where does all of that come from? The difficulty is solved when we realize that all creation is an effect. It is real enough, as real as it is supposed to be. It is actually there, right? People are actually there. Everything is actually there. All of it is going on. But this is the integrity of everything actually being itself and being an expression. So how is it that this stuff happens? So the next section here, this last paragraph, Ernest Holmes is essentially paraphrasing an ancient Hindu understanding that has been really, really, really helpful to me. And to recognize that because creation is effect, it's evolving. Unlike spirit, which is absolute and therefore perfect. We observe in creation an atomic intelligence, right? The atoms actually seem to behave orderly and intelligently. When they get together, they form molecules in an orderly pattern. There seems to be some design to how all of these things go together. A molecule, an atom, and a molecule in a cell in a newborn actually knows in some intelligent way how to become heart and lungs and spine and eyes and hair, right? So this atomic intelligence doesn't imply self-consciousness, but it does understand that there is consciousness that is intelligent, that knows something. Then a simple consciousness, which is in the Hindu statement, when that consciousness begins to grow, when we don't think of atoms and molecules as growing, but if we look at plants, they grow. They grow and they reproduce. After which comes a personal consciousness, which is Ernest Holmes's paraphrasing self-awareness, and then a cosmic consciousness. So the Hindu statement translated into English goes like this: consciousness sleeps in the rocks, waves in the grass, moves in the animal, and awakens in the human being, or obviously anywhere else that self-awareness is happening. Anywhere where there is awakening of self-consciousness, self-awareness. And beyond that, cosmic consciousness. And there's so many possibilities of what that might be. He says elsewhere, he says in the upper hierarchies, the cosmic consciousness in the upper hierarchies. And so all of this consciousness is expressing itself through creation. So the atomic consciousness is expressing itself through atoms and minerals and rocks. The simple consciousness, as it evolves, expresses itself in something that is growing and reproducing, but it can't actually move from place to place. It needs something to help it move from place to place. Then it grows again, evolves again into another level of consciousness, which is that which can move from place to place, right? That's the primary difference between plants and animals. Animals can get up and move. They can choose where they live. They can find food. They can do all of those kinds of things. So they reproduce and they grow, but they also move. Then when we move to self-consciousness, self-awareness in either the human being or, as I said, anywhere else that we understand self-consciousness to be evolving, right? What is self-consciousness but the ability to know that one reproduces, grows, and can move? Do you see? This level of consciousness now, we can actually see what's going on, which means we can learn to understand what's going on, which means that we can begin to move non-instinctually, but through the power of choice. So it is that internal ability of consciousness to choose that moves us now out of effect, right? We can stand outside in the rainstorm, or we can go inside. The plant can't. Actually, the plant is very happy to have the rain until it floods. And then it's like, whoa, wait a minute. But the plant can do nothing about it. The animal can run for shelter, can find shelter in the rainstorm, but can't determine necessarily, although, the elephants certainly did with the tsunamis in Southeast Asia, but in general, it's challenging to know where to go to be out of the flooding, right? And yet we can precisely determine where's the flooding going to be, and we can get ourselves not only out of the flooding, but completely out of the way, because we can understand what's causing the flooding, what are the laws behind the way water moves, all of those things, right? Do you see? We can now stand outside of the effect and observe it, which allows us to make choices. So the question is, what does this ability of self-awareness have to do with the problem of suffering? Why is there suffering if it's all one and it's all good? So we're going to stop there. We're going to see how do we answer that question? Because the problem of evil, the problem of why do bad things happen to good people, is one of the most fundamental problems that science, psychology, and religion, and a philosophy are all trying to answer and trying to give some guidance, because the truth is we want to avoid bad things, don't we? And if we're generally integrous, we want to avoid inflicting bad things on others. So we're going to stop there. We're going to say good morning to Ryan and to Richard. We're in our new space here. We're in the meditation hall here as we've moved CSLDallas, and we've come into this lovely space, so we're still figuring it out. I know we're going to get some lights. We unfortunately don't have our revolving art gallery behind us anymore, which is now out in the front when you first walk in, which is lovely for the people that are in person. So we are working on having some beautiful art back here for you all who are online to look at. So we're going to turn to say good morning to Ryan.
Well, good morning, Dr. Peter, and I must say, I know you guys can't see me, but it is a little awkward because now I have to kind of do this.
I know, right?
Hey, everybody. I have to turn my head and tilt my eyes just to wave to everybody. So good morning to everybody. Welcome to our new space, and we're so glad that you're in community with us today. No matter where you're joining us all over the globe, we are happy to have you here. So as Dr. Peter was mentioning, this is an engaging conversation, so we'd love to hear from you. For the folks here in the room, we've kind of changed the layout. So this section that's just right in front of me is going to be our new space for those folks who wish to not be shown on video. And for all the lovely folks right in front of me right here that I'm kind of waving my hand to, you guys will be on camera. So just heads up for that if you want to switch seats. And for those who are joining us online via Zoom, you can always hit the raise your hand icon and I can bring you into the room, or you can put your questions inside of the Q&A and I'll bring that in as well. And for all the lovely folks who are joining us all over the globe, I don't usually shout out people on Facebook Live, but I see Tracy Brown out there in Houston. Shout out Tracy Brown, we love you.
Good morning, Tracy.
And for everybody else joining us, please drop where you're located at and any questions or comments that you might have about today's discussion, and I can bring that into the room as well. And so I just want to go here into the audience, just poll anybody who wants to say something.
We have one right here.
All right, well, I need a friend. Hello, can you pass that along? There we go.
Right here.
So just make sure to say your name and then ask your question or comment.
And remember that we don't have speakers in here. Speaking into the microphone is so that people online can really hear.
Good morning, Dr. Petra. This is Armando.
Good morning, Armando.
This is a perfect topic for me right now. What I'm experiencing is a higher level of consciousness. I feel in my intuition, I feel my body, my mind, and my soul is shifting to a higher place. And this week, when I first founded Harvard Project, I applied everything that I learned here, from visioning to visioning classes, coming to these classes, applying everything. And for the first 6 years, I did not get paid because that was my choice. Mm-hmm. And this week, now, have the opportunity to start to live the life that I want to live, my properest life. Yes. And I met with a executive compensation consultant, and to see the worth of what I've co-created with Spirit, and what is the value of what I co-created. And I'm getting to finally see the fruits of my labor. And I've been running in such a fast pace, things are manifesting like no one's business. And I'm finally getting to the point that I can get to take a deep breath. Like, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
The CSLDallas community that continues to support me, and to be able to do this. And then, when it comes to lack, I go into the underserved communities and a lot of lack. But at the same time, we're bringing hope to them. We've given out over 1,000 laptops, almost 1,000 people graduating from digital skills. And they lack, but yet I can still bring and make an impact in our world.
Right. Right.
And to be there at this moment and just so filled with joy that not only for me did I get to put myself first, but the joy of how I get to impact the world. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Armando, and congratulations. And what an amazing opportunity. Can you just pass that back over? Thanks. What an amazing opportunity to celebrate with you for, all of that giving and giving and giving and all that hard work that you've done, both actually in action and in consciousness. And what we see is that we live in a reciprocal universe, right? So now it's time for some of that to come back to you, not just in positive feelings like I'm doing good work, but also to actually be compensated for that work. I am so thrilled for you. Congratulations. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Good. All right, we have a comment online.
Yes, it's one of my favorite quotes. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Shift happens. Good one, right?
I know, right. When you stub your toe, or you break your leg, or you have an accident, or things happen, right? The pain is real. The question is, do we turn it into suffering, right? And what's the difference between pain and suffering? There's another good question. Anybody want to take a gander at that one? Take a try on what causes pain to turn into suffering? We have a quiet room this morning. Well, if you have an answer, you can throw it in the chat, and Ryan will read it out.
I have one.
Okay.
It's saying pain is physical.
Well, true, but we can also have emotional pain, right? We can seriously have emotional pain. We can have mental pain, no question about it. And we can have pain over a failure. We can have pain over a heartbreak. So I wouldn't say it's only physical. Go ahead.
Well, they followed up also just now by saying suffering is our emotional response.
Well, so I think that's partially true, but I think what creates the emotional response is the story we tell about it. It's how we talk to ourselves about the pain. This is awful. That person did it purposefully. It'll never get any better. Oh my God, why do I always have these problems, right? We turn our pain into suffering in the way in which we take it up and the way we hold it, which may be emotional, but often more likely has to do with how we think about it, how we ruminate about it, how we keep thinking about it, how we think about it again and again and again and again. Right? And usually in some sort of negative context, an expectation of it to stay the same or get worse. And so when our minds are obsessed with the pain, then we turn that pain into suffering. Pain is a real experience. It tells us something. Something happened and it hurt. Absolutely. Whether it's physical, emotional, or mental pain, something happened and it hurt. That kind of hurt, right? The reality of it is our job is to feel the hurt and then decide what, if anything, there is to do. Pay more attention when you step off the curb. Watch the red flags in a relationship. Don't get sucked into a bad relationship. Oh, once again, here I am. What can I learn from it? Oh, I have anguish over the fact that I was supposed to give this amazing presentation and I froze at the last minute and I couldn't do it, and I have so much anguish over it. What can we learn? The question always is, what can we learn? What can we choose? How do we do it differently? Or, quite frankly, how do we live with it? How do we take it up? How do we manage to move forward in our life and not make the pain, the thing that is painful, not make it the end-all be-all of our life? And that's a challenge, right? It's especially a challenge when we're living from our humanness, when we're inside the human condition. And we believe that there's nothing that we can do or to alter our situation or our circumstances. There's I think it's the similar quote. It's another version of that. Is this the one you just wrote, that you just read out? Pain is real, suffering is optional. Is that what you wrote? Is that the one? It's a Wayne Dyer quote. Pain is real, suffering is optional. Right?
This one says pain is inevitable.
Yeah,
suffering is optional.
Yes, and it's true. I mean, ask any woman who's given childbirth. Pain is inevitable, big pain, little pain, whatever. Pain is inevitable, but to suffer over it. And why is it that women don't suffer generally over childbirth unless they've lost the child or they themselves are in imminent danger, right? Because the joy of the child completely alters the experience of pain. And most women immediately forget it, or we would never have a second child. That would never happen. And so this idea, right, that's a one way that we can think about pain and suffering. But why is there suffering in the universe? Why is there suffering in the human experience? Why have we ourselves suffered individually or collectively? Why do we inflict suffering on others? Anybody want to bring a thought forward?
I'm Lisa. It seems like it has to do with different states of consciousness that we're in. Mm-hmm. Because I know, human consciousness, we've seen lists of, going all the way down to different states that, someone who is doing evil acts is not going to be at the same place of self-consciousness as someone who is optimistic. That's all I can think of, is just how you are, your state of consciousness at the moment.
Yeah,
and what you've been through creating those things that have brought you to where you're at and how you see the world and how you react with the world.
Right. There's a lot of truth to what you say, Lisa, right? That it has something to do with our states of consciousness. And one of the big pieces of that state of consciousness is the state of consciousness, whether or not, this is why this idea that creation is only an effect. This is why this is so important. Because when we are suffering, we generally give causal purpose to things outside of us. This thing is happening to me, and I can't do anything about it. That is the seed of suffering, is that experience of it's happening to me, which is a very real human experience. If you're standing in the rain, you get wet, and it is in fact happening to us. The getting wet is happening to us. And so so our job is to not make the effect, creation, the cause of our experience. Shifting out of the idea that the cause is out there to taking responsibility and authority for a different cause, we have the opportunity of moving ourselves out of the onslaught, right, of the things that we're experiencing, and ultimately the switch there is the power to choose. Choose how I take it up, choose how I see it, choose how I act, choose what I believe, choose what I think, and choose the identity from which I am living my life. Am I living my life from my human identity, subject to all of this, or am I living my life from the spiritual truth of who I am, which is actually a causal being, right? An individualized expression of the one. So if that unity is actually true, then this individualized expression is actually a part of that and has efficacy of its own. We actually have the ability to be causal. And there's lots of levels, and that's where I think the states of consciousness come in. At what level of causal ability do we believe we have? How much of that causal ability are we willing to embrace or try to practice, right? All of that is then limited or expanded by the level of consciousness that we keep seeking to achieve through our spiritual work. All right, I see a comment over here.
We'll go to Keenan, and then we'll come here to Marjorie online.
Great. Keenan, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Keenan. So all the esoteric practices and traditions that we study all have this monistic, pantheistic view of reality as something that speaks to me that I align with. But they all kind of teach in their own way the emanation from oneness. When you think about the Hindu tradition, Kabbalah, they talk about the left and right hand path. In Kabbalah, which I'm a little bit more familiar than the Hindu tradition, you have your pillar of mercy and then severity or justice. In Hermeticism, you have the principle of polarity. Mm-hmm. And so this doesn't just subtract from the idea of oneness. This is the oneness expressing itself in multiplicity. Mm-hmm. So to tie that back to the question of, where does evil come from, which I wouldn't describe it as that. I would tie that back into, these fundamental dualities that exist in our terrestrial existence that do emanate from oneness. And they're balanced. It's a balancing act. One feeds off, one is giving, and one is taking. In Kabbalah, when you talk about the pillar of mercy, the pillar of mercy is that outpouring of love, and the pillar of justice and severity is the balancing act for mm-hmm. that. So, some people would, call it the evil path or the dark path, or, people that, and that's not something that I agree with, but it serves a purpose, because with too much love you can spoil. So justice balances that love out, and you see it manifest in a physical world. If you go to the extreme, the Hermetic principle of polarity, if you take it all the way to the extreme, you do see these heinous and evil acts. This is its most extreme form, but that is, when we talk about the root or the cause, that's why I tie that root or cause back to.
Yes, and there's lots and lots and lots of truth to what you say. But if you remember and you study the Hindu tradition, the polarities only exist in creation. They do not exist in that out of which creation is formed.
What do you mean?
Well, if we recognize that there is absolute love, absolute joy, the absolute spirit, the infinite that is wearing this as a cloak, right? The Hindus say the moment, the instant that you postulate form of any kind, could be a form in another multiverse, could be light being, doesn't matter. The minute that you postulate form or experience form, you in that instant must have the pairs of opposites. Yes. Because in form, you have up and down, hot and cold, in and out, right and left, right? Because you have space and you have time. You can have past and future. But without form, which is actually the causal realm, which what in metaphysics is called the absolute, right? This is relative. Everything is related to everything else. It's hot only because you know what cold is, or you prefer it cold in the moment, right? So the heat and cold is relative to our experience, to whether the sun is up, right? So it's this in metaphysics is called the relative. Understanding the spiritual aspect is the absolute. So in the ancient traditions, you see it especially in the Ankh from the Egyptians, but you see it also in the Celtic traditions. Anybody who has a cross, right? The original meaning of the cross is the intersection between the absolute and the relative. So it is only on the relative that we have the pairs of opposites. Only on the relative, which is why it is not causal, it's the effect. From the absolute sense, from the absolute reality, that spiritual essence of who we are, there is actually only love. So rather than thinking of it as light and dark, as if they were two sides of a coin, opposites, right? Science of mind and metaphysics understands it's either the full presence of light or its absence. It's either the full presence of love or its absence. When we're living in our purely human experience and see ourselves as purely human, then we think of these things as the outpicturing of that balance. But our job as spiritual beings is to stand in the absolute. And our understanding is there's no possibility that that sort of love is spoiling, right? That is then how it is outpictured in creation. And so this idea that this evil exists, right? Evil, and to your point, right? Evil is simply the absence of alignment with spirit. It's the absence of the presence of love. It's the absence of any of those absolute qualities that we ascribe to the impress of life itself, right? So it isn't a thing of its own, and it's not actually required in the human experience or in the spiritual experience. The spiritual experience requires no balance. Only the physical, which is why the physical, this balancing act, is always an effect, never a cause. So our job is to bring back cause into the mix, right? So if we experience something that we say is heinous or evil, we see something, we are impacted by something that is causing that is causing suffering, right? The option or the invitation is that we move out of the balancing act into a causal place, right? Otherwise, we have to say, well, my suffering is somehow ordained to balance out my light. And the science of mind and metaphysics absolutely disagrees with that. It would be as if the universe were saying, okay, plant, okay, animal, you're having too much fun, so now we're going to cause something to happen to you so that you will feel the other side of it. Our ability to see that polarity is what allows us actually to move out of the polarity and say, I'm not going to play on the polarity anymore. I'm going to be causal in this moment about bringing forth the deepest spiritual alignment that I possibly can, right? So thus raising ourselves out of evil, bad, suffering things, being able to look at it and learn, grow, make a new choice, become causal. So we're constantly playing on this, right? The cross, but not like hanging on it. We're not hanging on the cross, right? Which is why so many of them in the Celtic traditions and so many of the indigenous traditions, the cross has our equilateral arms to show that in the circle, showing the oneness, the spiritual axis, and the physical plane, right? The plane of experience. In the Egyptian Ankh, you have a little more of the length, but you have the circle at the top reminding us that it's a constant circle, it's a constant whole of the infinite moving into form and moving back out of form, moving into form and moving back out of form. And one of the biggest suffering we have is when something moves out of form. Death, loss, the loss of a job, the loss of a family, the loss of a home, the loss of somebody we love, the loss of our own sense of whatever it is, right? And that loss is part of the polarity of our human experience. But we turn it into suffering when we want it to be different, when we need for it to be different, or when we are stuck in the polarity realm. Right? So what our spiritual work is to move back into our own causal realm. Can we feel the grief without telling a story that we deserved it or it was done to us? Can we just feel the grief? Feel the anger. Feel the sadness. Feel the depression. Feel the feeling, which is very real. It's a very real feeling. And it is no less real than the pain of breaking your leg. No less real. It's then what we do with it. Then we become causal with the way in which we take it up, right? And our choices then are also to say, not only am I going to be causal, but my causalness can be no to that, yes to this. No more of that. No more racism, no more polluting the planet, no more abuse, no. Yes to this. Yes to a whole life. Yes to inclusion. Yes to diversity. Yes to love. Yes to this. No, yes. No, yes. Right? That's our choice over and over and over and over and over again. And of course, if this is all in effect, this is the thing that's so challenging and so powerful. If this is all in effect, and it's all an outpicturing of other causes, we can, in fact, make a difference. Which is why we're having a consciousness raising event for our election this Friday night coming up, the 18th at 7 o'clock. You can be online, you can be here in person, because we understand that the consciousness that we have, does make an impact, not only on our own consciousness, but to be causal in consciousness as a whole, to raise ourselves out of what Troward would call the law of averages, to raise ourselves out of the generic polarities into causal reality. Over and over and over again, our spirituality invites us into this. All right, fabulous. Thank you, Keenan. So we have a comment over here, and then we have one online, or should we stay in the room?
Let's go to the online first. And we have about 7 more minutes here, so just keep that in mind as we're going along. Marjorie, would you like to join us and ask your question?
Good morning, Marjorie.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, I don't know if I have a question per se. I just wanted to kind of speak to the topic.
Good. Go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm kind of going a little bit with the Hermetic principles, and I think that science of mind is based somewhat on that.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And then I also, when I kind of bring in for myself at least, I kind of think of these types of questions as, why, and these are some of those koans that don't necessarily have an answer, or they have many, many answers, and science of mind has one answer, which is one of many. And so I'm kind of like coming in from the notion that as we understand spirit wanted to experience itself as us and as in its manifest world of polarity, so that it could experience itself in its totality. And I think that the totality part of it, and what I conceive to be wholeness, is that it does include both sides of any polarities. So pain, pleasure principle, suffering, joy, happy, sad, all these different two sides of the same coin are there for our benefit. It's not like something that happens to us, it happens for us, so that we can either learn something from it or develop compassion, and to also to work towards alleviating the suffering of others. And the other piece of it for me is to be able to see the beauty, because the first cause, for me, those aspects of the divine, peace, power, beauty, light, love, joy, wisdom, are in everything. So the beauty is in the suffering, as well as whatever the opposite of it is. So for me, I'm trying to learn how to see the beauty in the beast, so to speak. And
Yep.
feel, so when I
Lovely.
when I am suffering, something so-called bad happens to me, my job at this point is to be able to see that as it is not happening to me, it's happening for me. And I have an opportunity then to practice what I've been learning, to practice these principles.
Right.
And to develop a compassion for myself and for others, and to allow those two sides of the same coin to dance with each other. And then and within the dancing of that becomes that sacred third.
Yes, absolutely, Marjorie. Thus, yes, absolutely. Thus proving my point that you move immediately into a place of choice. How am I going to hold this? Exactly right. How am I going to hold this? And so I'm going to decide that it is for my benefit, that I'm going to learn something from it. That's exactly right. And so that is exactly the choice point. And in that moment, we stop suffering. We actually make good out of it. Precisely the move that we're trying to get a hold of here. So beautifully expressed. Really, really appreciate. You always express things so beautifully, Marjorie. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have one more comment here in the room.
How much time? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. We got time.
Okay, I apologize. Hey,
No.
everybody, I'm Jamin.
Hi, Jamin.
Hey, first time here.
Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here. So I grew up highly religious, but within this last year, I started my own spiritual awakening process, and it's been a beautiful journey, learning a lot. I just want to speak a little bit to the point that of the topic today, pain versus suffering. So a lot of my life, I've experienced suffering, and it was a repetitive cycle. And I think a lot of us need to remember that part of the one's plan in our current density that kind of helps understanding is the law of confusion, right? So we all have the ability of free will, and then we all have, during this density here on Earth, no remembrance of anything prior to this, right? So we kind of start on a new slate each time we start our journey. But the suffering that I found, and it's beautifully aligned with what you're saying, is all of us are a result. Our mental complex that's here on this state is a result of the programming, right? Of expectations from parents or societies or religions or cultures of what we consume and all of the things that we are taught that will bring us happiness in this life, right? Like if you do these things, you know, if you have this job, or if you have this marriage with this family, or you do these things, or whatever the case, these things will give you happiness, right? And so that is your programmed ideology that is not really connected to the higher self. And so that
Right.
when we base those expectations on the programming and not aligned with the higher self, the pain that we see is not a realistic pain, where it then generates suffering because we're not reaching these expectations that are not aligned with the higher self.
Yeah, so, right, exactly. Thank you so much. And so I'm sorry we're going to have to wrap this up here shortly, but you're exactly right? And so the experiences that we have are constantly educating our choices. Am I following the program? Does it really make me happy? Wait, this isn't really making me happy. This isn't really working. Over and over and over and over again, we have the opportunity then to choose with alignment with spiritual truth, alignment with our highest self, or with this plane of avoidance of pain, want only pleasure, whatever it all is. Beautiful. And to your point, And to Marjorie's point here, this is one of my favorite statements. We'll close with this in science from the very first page of the very first introductory chapter. This is the last paragraph. Okay. We see abundance in the universe. We cannot count the grains of sand on a single beach. The earth contains untold riches, and the very air is vibrant with power. Why then is man weak, poor, and afraid? Right? Basically, the human condition. Why are we experiencing the human condition? The science of mind deals with these questions. The divine plan is one of freedom. This is the only plan that science of mind believes in. You're free to believe in whatever plan you want to believe in. This is the only plan that the science of mind puts forward, that you are completely free. The divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. And what is that freedom but to be fully ourselves in all of the ways that we can? So we are free to make a mess. And I would beg to differ that this mess that we create is somehow in any way, shape, or form God ordained. It is exclusively our freedom to use the causal realm in whatever way we choose. So we can have racism, we can have a Holocaust, we can have all the wars, all the things that are going on in Israel and Gaza, because those are all human outpicturings of our freedom. And over and over and over again, we get to individually and collectively learn from how we exercise our freedom. Our freedom to imbibe substances, our freedom to have affairs, our freedom to greed, our freedom to, I'm going to make all the money I can and I don't care about anybody else, our freedom to exploit the planet, our freedom to make a mess is all freedom, because that's how loved we are. We are loved. We are so imbued with spirit that we are free to discover ourselves. We are free to discover that we are causal. And slowly but surely, we are in fact discovering that. We are in fact discovering it, despite the news that we get here in the U.S. We are in fact discovering it. And it is pretty astonishing, the millions of people who are making different choices. All right, Ryan, I saw that you had something.
Yeah, on that note of freedom, I just wanted to mention we are going to be having a free Sustainability Circle meetup later on today. It's going to be both online and in person, and what they're going to be talking about is they have info sessions, and each session they focus on different topics that are related around sustainability. And today's topic is going to be around transportation needs and how we can live a more sustainable way with our transportation. So if you'd like to join the conversation, it's going to be right after our celebration, starting at about 11:30. And it's short, it's maybe a half an hour long, so it's really good, it's informative. You can meet other like-minded people who are trying to help build more sustainability. For those online, feel free to go to our website and just click on our events page, go to today, and you will see the event registration form, and that way you can get the link to the Zoom meeting. And for everybody else, if you're here on campus, just head on over to the STEM room after our celebration.
Yay, and one last thing, we are having a Day of the Dead celebration on November 2nd in the afternoon. We'd love to invite you to bring your loved ones who have passed away, come celebrate your ancestors. We'll be having that celebration, I think it's at 3, but don't quote me on it. So it is November 2nd. You can go out online and register for that as well. It's really going to be a very unique and special event, and we'd love for you to participate in it. All right, so that's it for us today. Keep exploring, keep learning, keep growing, keep diving deeper into your spiritual self, your spiritual truth. We'll see you in the celebration, or we'll see you next week. Bye for now. Yay! Thank you.